Hi, Jacob.
Hello, David.
Really nice to meet you. And there's been self-realization for a little while now, so it'll be quite interesting to hear how things have been recently, but also what led to that and your kind of life experience as well. So maybe you could just begin, well, wherever you feel would be a good place to start.
All right. Yeah, I mean, it seems like now things are going a lot quicker for people.
Mm.
For
Yeah,
me, that wasn't the case.
right.
It's been a long, long journey. But to back up, when I was, I mean, I have memories from 2, 3 years old
Mm.
and feeling very much a stranger in this world
Mm.
and not understanding, not getting it, not understanding why people are lying,
Mm.
things like that.
Mm.
My parents uh, and I didn't. Yeah, obviously I didn't understand it back then at that age. I didn't have an intellectual understanding. I just felt strange. I
Yes.
felt like I was in a strange place,
Yes.
and that continued.
Mm.
Um, I, in some ways, I, I mean, I was fortunate enough. I grew up in the countryside,
Mm.
close to nature.
Mm.
Loved being around animals
Mm.
and in nature as much as I could, really. Um, then, uh, yeah, I mean, I don't know how much to go into in detail, but mm,
Was there a kind of turning point? Because you're obviously still in touch with your spiritual nature at a very early age. Sometimes there's a kind of trigger into the world at a certain point
yeah,
with a
I
kind
mean,
of
I guess
process.
yes. I mean, I was sort of aware of that.
Mm.
I could feel it, not in those terms, but I could feel, I could notice the transformation of being more and more identified with being
Mm.
Jacob.
Mm.
And
Yes.
that took place somewhere between five and, well, earlier than that, but the transformation, so called,
Mm.
was complete around age 7 or so.
Yes. Yeah.
And it was a quite significant difference
Mm.
because up to that stage, I mean, it was definitely more effortless
Mm.
and joyful,
Yeah.
always present,
Yeah.
even up until that point. But around that point, it turned everything very heavy.
Mm. Did you
And
have in the earlier years, you mentioned kind of being able to review the behavior of adults, and did you feel that you were functioning more from a kind of grown-up perspective, even though you were young? You were aware of things which adults wouldn't necessarily expect you to be aware of.
yes,
Mm.
yeah, very much. Um, for instance, when I was 5, I told my parents they should get a divorce, which they did a year later.
You-
No, yeah, so I was quite outspoken. I wasn't silent. Um, but yeah, definitely, I felt like that. I felt like why I don't know, adult, but
Hmm.
a sense of maturity somehow
Sure.
that I could see why. I mean, to me, it seemed like everyone, adults, made everything very complicated
Mm. Mm.
and a lot of dishonesty
Mm.
towards each other, not really communicating.
Mm.
I called my family gatherings the house of monologues because there wasn't really real communication.
Mm. Mm.
So
So were you creative as a boy? Were you,
yes,
that was something that probably happened quite early on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an architect now, and when I was 5, I remember I made my mom take me in the car to a nearby field so I could collect clay.
Oh, yes.
And I brought the clay back, and I started doing, well, little,
Modeling.
yeah, modeling architecture models
Ah,
from that point.
that's
So,
interesting that it emerged as architecture so early on, because quite often it's more fine art directed, and then it sort of develops into architecture. But so it was known quite early for you.
well, I definitely painted also,
Mm.
drew and painted and all that. So that was definitely, I mean, obviously that I did that more than the architectural aspect.
Sure.
But I suppose my father is also an architect.
Yes.
That probably has something to do with
Mm.
it, I would guess.
Yes. Yeah. Did
Yeah.
you see your dad making models and then you wanted to try it?
Not really. I don't know. Maybe he just spoke about it. I actually don't remember.
Mm. Mm.
Uh, but yeah, creative also. I mean, this was back in the 70s, my
Yeah.
childhood, right?
Yes.
So it was way before cell phones and internet and all that.
Yes. Yes.
So it was easy for me to just come up with things to do
Mm.
out in nature,
Mm.
the simple things, but joyful.
Yeah. And what stage would you say was there a kind of return to an interest in spirituality? Did that come much later, or did it come? Because usually the teen years are quite challenging, in terms of personalization. Um, how did it go in that sequence?
I'm struggling to remember really, but it's not a clear
Mm.
pinpoint in time
Mm.
or an event like that. But my life was very challenging. My parents divorced early,
Mm.
and it was like I said, and there was a lot of turbulence, and I guess that triggered something.
Yes.
But in a way, it was always underlying. I always had an underlying feeling of, how can I say, presence of something, divine presence or something. It was always there, and so that was never really gone. It was
No.
always there. I just didn't know it, you know what I mean? Like I didn't
Yes.
have a conch, it wasn't clear to me
No.
what it was. I just felt like it didn't belong.
Yes. It's so
Um,
common, as you may have heard mention on other conversations, that's quite a traditional kind of sequence in a way, where there can be an invitation into the personal realm in childhood, which is designed to create quite intense personalization. Um, but for most, well, for everyone I have a conversation with, it obviously didn't work really, because they found their way through that. But that's quite a common experience in a way.
yeah, so I guess due to the turbulence in my parents with my in my family, uh, I did I did end up in sort of, violent circumstances.
Yeah. Were you rebellious? Was that an aspect?
Yeah, for sure. Very rebellious
Yeah.
early on.
Mm.
I any forcing me to do something against my will, which I guess, but more not just
Yes.
typical that type of rebellion. It was if something impeded my freedom, I didn't stand for it
No. That's
indifferent.
actually, in terms of spirituality, that level of will is coming from one's infinite nature. Um, the system doesn't want you to know that, because it doesn't align with the system very well. But there is something which, it's a very uncompromising kind of will which comes through, and but the system portrays it as being a kind of weakness or an imbalance in our personality. But it's quite an interesting one, that one.
Yeah, it is. And I'm, obviously growing up then, especially as a teenager, then I, there was the feeling because of the sort of society, school, everyone around you sort of indicating that, well, there's something wrong with me, right? Being antisocial or whatever they call it. They have these labels for it. I
Yeah.
mean, in hindsight, I can see no, that exactly what you said. It's the spirit is freedom itself.
Yes. Yeah. And also the invitations into those limited kind of identities, they work on the basis of inversion. So what they're trying to convince you of, which is the idea that there's something wrong with you, it's actually that there's, that there's something wrong elsewhere, put it like that.
Yes. Yes, but growing up, like at that stage, I wasn't aware of it. Now I
Mm,
looked into those aspects of what is going on there, maybe perhaps a little bit more. But
mm,
uh, so the teenage years were tough, like they are for
mm.
many people.
Yes. Yeah.
But at the same time, that came to sort of a breaking point. Wanting to fit in, but at the same time feeling like,
As though we're part of it anyway.
yeah, exactly.
Mm,
And going to social gatherings and things like that, and getting very quickly bored with the
mm,
repetitive conversations
mm, mm,
at parties and things like that. It
mm,
just so I may so this so now we're up, let's say 17 years old or something, right?
mm,
I just decided, no, I'm gonna whatever, even if I'm alone for the rest of my life, I will be true to myself.
mm, mm.
And because I noticed, of course, speaking about things that interest me didn't interest my surround. They had no interest in those things.
Yeah.
They, they called me, oh, you're so deep and you like to think, like as if that's a
Yes, there's a deficiency.
bad thing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
So
quite early on, actually, to take that stand. Um, but yeah, that's good. You weren't wasting any time.
no, I guess I just felt like no. Well, I mean, I didn't know. I thought, okay, it's
Mm,
sort of taking letting go of false identity.
yeah.
It's not, it can be challenging, right?
Yes.
There are all these challenges,
Mm,
usually, so it's not like it's clear in advance
no.
what the outcome will be,
No.
but just trusting my intuition, really.
Yes. Yeah.
Uh,
It's quite uncompromising, really, in that sense, and it's obviously guided you very effectively.
that part has,
Mm,
yes.
mm,
And so that became reinforcing for me. So luckily, yeah, quite early,
mm.
I noticed.
And
Yeah.
sorry, Jacob, did you find any more compatibility when you were studying architecture? Because with other creative people, because creativity is coming from our infinite nature, it's coming through the body of wisdom or effortless being. Most creative people have some sense of that. They may be personalizing it and think that, they're great at architecture or whatever, without realizing that it's coming through them. But sometimes there is more compatibility with creative people.
Yeah, I did notice that, but when I was at architecture school
Mm,
back then, I didn't have that awareness.
mm,
It wasn't clear to me in that sense.
mm.
It just seemed normal somehow.
Yeah.
I noticed that when I'm not trying to be creative,
Mm,
just let that come. That's where creativity is.
yeah, exactly.
Uh, but for sure, I mean, perhaps because my father is also an architect,
Mm,
so that there is that programming was probably quite strong
yes.
during my education.
Mm,
So I really, went into it on a very deeply
yes.
in a personal sense. Oh, now I'm making a career out of this, and
Mm,
got deep into that.
mm,
But that only lasted so long because I didn't. that kind of didn't that made me miserable to some degree, right?
Mm.
Like it does when it's not natural, when it's not
Yes.
coming from a natural place. So even though I guess did well,
Mm. Mm.
um, so towards towards the end of, I mean, it's a 5-year education.
Mm.
In the last couple of years, I just felt, no, I want to, my life should be about, I mean, I didn't really know how to phrase it, but I just
Mm.
felt like I wanted to be even more about spirituality or
Mm.
spiritual development, whatever,
Yes.
things like that's how I was thinking at the
Mm.
time.
But you made the
Uh,
commitment to complete the course.
yes,
Mm.
yes, I did.
Yeah, that's
And I'm
good.
glad I did.
Mm. And you practiced architecture around the world too, didn't you?
Yes, yes, yes. I've been living in a few years in Asia, a few years in South America, a few years in North America, which is why I have an American accent,
Yeah.
and yeah, many places in Europe,
Mm.
around in Europe.
Mm.
And so yeah, I've been, and it's quite naturally work just came to me. I never was planning, oh, I'm going to go there and start working as an architect.
Mm.
It just happened. People will find out or
Yes.
and see, and then I would do a project
Mm.
and
So you were invited, really, were you, to, people kind of became aware of your work and then you were invited to different locations, perhaps?
not like that. No, it was a spiritual quest, a spiritual
Right. Okay.
search
Yeah.
that brought me. I mean, it brought me. I was 3 years in Buddhist monasteries in India
Oh,
in
yes.
in the mid 90s.
Hmm.
And I felt I wanted to go there because, I think it was part of that time in the early 90s.
Yes.
Like if you want to pursue spiritual matters, you go to
Yeah, have to
the
be
Far East, right?
serious. Yes.
That was sort of the,
Mm.
now it's not like that, but so that's what I did. And I lived there for 3 years.
Mm.
And there I didn't really work as an architect. I literally lived in different meditation centers and Buddhist
Mm.
monasteries for 3 years.
Is that how the spirituality started, or was there something prior to that? Because that's going in the deep end, really.
I didn't really do anything like a specific practice before that.
Mm. Have you
I
been
think,
reading books or studying Buddhism?
yeah, there was that.
Mm.
I was introduced to New Age literature
Mm.
quite early, and even psychology early because I wanted to see if I could figure out what was wrong with my family. So yeah, New Age literature
Mm.
quite early, but
Yeah.
that was already in my teens, I suppose.
Yes.
Yeah. So that there was definitely something there
Mm.
that
So were you looking at some of the 60s teachers, people like Alan Watts or
yeah.
Osho, those
Yeah, Alan Watts for sure, but that came actually a little bit later. I it was more like really new agey stuff.
mm. Mm.
I don't even remember now, but
No.
um,
So
the
that
road
led to the Buddhism.
traveled and
Sorry?
the road less traveled
Oh,
by
yes.
Hans Beck, and
Yes. Yeah.
I'm having a hard time remembering now, but some of the well-known,
Mm. Yes.
and there was something in there, but of course I didn't feel like that spurred me on, but it didn't feel like, oh no, it wasn't even close to
Mm.
what I was looking for.
Yeah.
And that brought me then to Asia, right? That's
Yes.
when I went to. But it's true, it was something there, triggered something, right?
Did
Uh,
you have deep experiences in meditation while you were in Asia?
yes,
Mm.
I did a lot of meditation, obviously,
Mm.
spending there it became full on. I did a three
Mm.
month meditation retreat
Mm.
where we meditated 8 hours a day
Mm.
for 3 months, and a whole month was a month of silence. The
Mm.
last month.
Mm.
So there was for sure, there was a lot of sort of dealing with what they call shadow work, or
Mm,
looking at dark aspects of my own being
mm,
at that time,
mm,
because you go so deep. I mean, couldn't sleep,
mm,
obviously, being so,
mm.
um, just spend a lot of time going through. So there was a lot of cleansing in that sense
Mm.
at that
Did you
time.
have different themes coming up emotionally and mentally, would you say?
Yeah, and just sort of sitting there and dealing with um, what I what I viewed at the time as problematic aspects of
Mm,
my life
mm,
and myself and the relationships and
mm.
my family and all these things. And but coming from the Buddhist perspective, a more compassionate, I didn't look at it in a judging way. I wanted to
Yeah.
see, okay, what is my role in all that, and all these.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
But it was still on the basis of personalization, I guess.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
very much.
Mm,
Although I think that what there was, it was starting with the whole Buddhist idea of emptiness,
mm.
or sort of approaching,
Yes. Impersonal being.
yeah, approaching that. And I and I think I took that myself. I was more or less kicked out of the monastery after a while. Again, the rebelliousness, because I started asking questions. They say, "Oh, you can ask anything," and so I did. And anyway, that was not appreciated. They wanted me to become a monk. I
Mm,
mean, they said you are meant to be a monk, and I did enjoy,
mm,
all of a sudden coming from, I was born in Sweden,
mm.
um, and coming from the sort of a very secular and very sort of materialistic
Yes.
mindset.
Mm,
To me, it was very liberating to be amongst people who are all about,
mm,
well, let's say religious at least,
mm. Yes.
pursuit,
Yeah.
seekers, right?
Yes.
They, but again, I didn't really, that wasn't the end station. I felt, yeah, but there
Mm.
is something else. So the seeking continued.
It's good you were committed to being self-referral though, and not to compromise your own inner knowing really, even at the expense of being kicked out of the monastery.
Yeah.
And so where did it take you from there?
Well, um, I actually met my now ex-wife
Mm,
in a monastery. We I entered a 5 month study program called Higher Studies for Tibetan Buddhism.
mhm,
And I met my ex-wife there.
mm,
And she's American. So we got married and I moved with her to United States,
mm, mm,
to Hollywood.
mm,
And anyway, so that was an amazing contrast. Um, but things changed as soon as I sort of landed there.
mm.
She changed a lot, and it didn't work. Um, so I actually went back to Europe, and I just what comes to me now is, because there is a link there, when I was doing a lot of meditations and spiritual practices in the monasteries in India and Nepal.
Mm,
I uh, felt very, very good,
mm,
right? No, and so I said in my sort of praying that anyone with problems,
mm.
I will take your problems,
Ah,
and I want to give you my happiness.
well,
And it worked, but not in the way that I
as you expected.
thought. No. And anyway, to a long story short, I my ex-wife had lived in Mexico.
Mm.
She even knew Carlos Castaneda and things like that.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Anyway, and she knew a small group of of Mexicans who did exorcism, where
Mm.
they help people who had trouble with the spirit world, what they
Yes.
call it, right? And because I started to feel like I wasn't in control of my own thoughts.
Mm.
I didn't know what was going on.
Mm.
Um, so she said, well, I think I know what's going on. I know some people in Mexico. So we went to Mexico
Mm.
and did a thing with them. And they didn't know anything. We made sure they didn't know anything about me
Mm.
at all.
Yes.
But they said, yeah, you have 1,128 spirits in you. And they were all, sort of lost somewhere.
Mm.
So it worked. And I mentioned that because it's quite powerful. Art.
It's a lost art, really, isn't it? I think that it is something very effective. In the West, we've been directed to things like psychotherapy and psychiatry, but actually those old methods are tried and tested. And well, if the practitioners are genuine, they can just be really effective.
Yes. Yeah, they said, well, now, they did their little thing, right? And not going to give all the details, but it was quite, to me at the time, I was open to all that because I had, as a child, also some kind of connection with the spirit world.
Mm.
There was some so-called ghosts and things like that in my childhood,
Mm.
but it just didn't seem so strange. But at the same time, growing up, being older,
Mm.
at that time when I was in Mexico, it was still, a lot more concepts around it. And I
Mm.
thought, well, I don't know, I'll keep open mind about it.
And
But
how did things change following the exorcism?
well, they said these humble people in Mexico, they said, well, we told everyone to leave, and we put our protective saint to
Mm.
watch over you, they said. So it'll be 2 weeks and then it will be just fine. And that's exactly what happened.
And so within 2 weeks, it was quite tangible, was it?
Yeah, yeah, it was
Light
just
and
gone. Like
yes,
I sort of felt like I could
yeah,
own myself again, so to speak.
great.
Yeah. But it was quite severe.
Mm.
Uh, but so that was a
What an interesting episode.
yeah, it was. And then let's see, okay. Yeah, I went back to Europe and then I spent some time in Europe, but then when I've just felt very quickly, I had to go to South America,
Mm.
to Ecuador.
Mm.
And I never even thought about that country before. And I think within a week or 2 weeks, I bought a plane ticket and just went there.
So
And
you just kind of knew in a way, but there was no logical reason.
there was no logical reason.
Mm. Mm.
I just felt compelled. I think I'd seen a video with a former astronaut guy
Mhm.
who lived in the south of Ecuador. But that was it, it was
Mm.
just
Mm.
anyway, I felt very strongly compelled to go there and I did.
Mm.
Now we're in 2009, 2010.
Yes.
And so I went there and I spent 3 years there.
Mm.
And that's where I did a lot of work as an architect.
Mm.
I completely unplanned, and it seemed there was a small village in the south of Ecuador,
Mm. So is
which
it a
seemed
more, sorry, Jacob, was it a
was
more worldly time then for those 3 years, would you say, or was there a spiritual dimension as well?
it was a very strong spiritual
Mm.
dimension. It was almost everything I cared about.
Mm. So it was quite integrated, really. It was spiritual and worldly combined.
Yes,
Mm.
yes, it was. It was things just was flowing,
Mm.
synchronicity all the time.
Mm.
Um, I even so that's when I got there, I was introduced by a friend. She asked me if I'd heard about non-duality.
Mm.
So this was, I think, 2010,
Mm.
and which I hadn't.
Mm.
It was new to me, but that was sort of the last piece of the puzzle.
Yes.
Uh, so it was a lot of Mooji initially. I watched on YouTube
Mm.
hours and hours and hours.
Mm.
Mooji. As an I was working as an architect, but I could, control when and how I
Yes.
worked and things like that. So that was great.
Mm.
Um, and then, um, um, yeah, I mean, it was so that was the whole. That was. I just felt that was really the last piece of the puzzle.
Mm.
Uh, as I dug into that, and then Rupert, Spira, and
Mm.
all these. Listen to a lot of different people.
Yes.
Then around that time, I'm not sure exactly when, maybe it was a year later or something,
Mm.
you were on Conscious TV.
Yes.
I don't remember exactly when that was, 2011 or 2000.
Yeah, I did a couple in 2008, and then I did some more in 2011. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And that was another shift,
Mm.
you could say. When I listened to you, I could tell that there was some communication from you,
Mm.
or via
Because
David.
you'd also been reviewing some of the kind of worldly structures prior to that as well. What sort of stage did that come in, where you were kind of looking at the sort of consensus reality or the conventional presentation of the way life is, and beginning to see the scenery shake a little bit?
Yeah, very much so. That was actually 2006,
Oh,
2007.
oh,
I
good.
really started to dig into that,
Mm. Mm.
um, which was I was with another woman there,
Mm.
2000, that I met 2005,
Mm.
2006, with whom I had a child. So
Mm.
I have a daughter
Oh, great.
who turned 17 here in
Oh,
a week and a half.
fantastic.
Yeah,
Where does she live?
but let me go back just.
Okay.
Sorry, because as I felt compelled to look into the more what's going on behind the scenes in the dualistic realm,
Yes.
right?
Mm.
There was a lot of things made sense to me that I knew intuitively,
Mm.
but but it was sort of getting confirmed by
Yes.
other researchers and things like that.
Mm.
So I went into that quite deeply,
Mm.
and obviously, having living with a woman, my partner, I felt like I wanted to share that with her.
Yes.
And she wasn't really interested or ready or whatever to hear that type of information.
Mm.
And to a lot of people, her included, it sounded crazy,
Mm.
right? When you start to describe what's really going on behind the scenes.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, the system portrays you as though there's something mentally wrong with you.
well, yeah,
I've had that accusation quite a few times.
have you? Okay.
Don't you think you should see a psychiatrist?
Yeah. Yeah, no, everyone, my family, all my friends, everyone. I didn't know anyone who didn't say, "You're Jacob, you're crazy." And really they were sincere, right?
Yeah.
And
Mm.
back then, 2008-ish, it wasn't like now. It's
No.
much more, you can say a lot more, but back then it was really, they looked at you like, "I'm sorry,
Yes.
but you sound
Yes.
crazy." Um,
Well, you can see how the really the conventional education system is designed to put people into mind predominance. And so where there's a spiritual dimension, there's a pre-existing um, ability to function from effortless being, or the body of wisdom. And so where there's alignment, much more so with the mental realm, anything going on in the body of wisdom, it's like a completely different channel. And so whatever you say, it doesn't register.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, sorry.
well, I guess we all go through the process of, thinking that if you explain things carefully, that people will understand. But it's as though the software hasn't been installed, so it isn't going to register. And at some point, that becomes apparent, so you don't do it anymore.
Yeah. It's literally, I mean, some well-known psychologists talk about that.
Mm,
You can literally, if you change some things in your brain, or some people who have a split personality,
mm.
one person, like a type of schizophrenia or something like that, you can literally be blind,
Yes,
while the other personality can see completely normal.
yes,
It's a metaphor in that
yes,
sense
yes,
for
definitely.
you can describe things, and you can show charts and PowerPoints with
Mm,
all the facts in the world, but they can't hear it or see
mm.
it.
No. Mm.
So yeah, that was more initially for me,
Yes,
and which I think is quite common when you start to see, oh, you want other people to see, look,
yes.
if we continue to live like this,
Mm.
we're actually possibly contributing to our own.
Demise.
Yeah. So back to just briefly.
Yeah.
So yeah, so my the mother of my child, then
Mm,
she just she we broke up, right?
mm.
So I haven't seen my daughter basically
Oh,
since
wow.
she was,
Mm,
well, 15 years or something.
wow. Mm.
Yeah. So it was another challenge, right?
Yes, that is.
Very challenging. That was, I
Mm,
mean, my heart was
mm,
completely broken.
mm.
So that was something that,
That was quite that was quite a powerful invitation back into the personalized realm, really. And
yes,
seeing the way the dualistic system works, it probably required something that extreme to grab your attention.
yeah, yeah. And it took me a long time to work through that, so to speak.
Mm,
But at the same time, it was helping me
mm.
to let go, or
Yes,
uh, to stop identifying with what's not
yes,
true,
yeah,
at least to a larger extent.
yes.
Yeah. So yeah, I
So how have things developed over maybe the past 10 or 12 years then? Because you became familiar with non-duality quite early on, really. Um, and then, so you were studying the more prominent non-duality teachers, I guess, for a while, were you, and quite committed to that?
yes, I
Mm,
was. I mean, that was always there,
mm,
like you say, for, well, about 14 years ago or something
mm.
like that, right?
Yeah.
For the past 14 years, always there. But as I left very turbulent circumstances, I went through the sort of honeymoon of awakening, as they call it,
Mm.
whilst in South America.
Yes.
I realized this might be jumping back and forth in my
That's
timeline.
okay.
Um, um, yeah, it was definitely some very dark night of the soul events.
So there was realization. What sort of year would that have been?
Well, the realization was, I'd say 2011,
Okay. Yeah.
2000, yeah, 2011.
Hmm.
That was sort of the realization, but I think I'd say it was more on an intellectual plane.
Hmm.
I mean,
So were there then invitations back into the dualistic realm, would you say?
Yes,
Mental and emotional invitations.
yes. To me, it was always usually in the realm of women.
Right.
There was something there, you
Mm,
know, having a certain my type of conditioning from my childhood and so forth.
mm,
So that's been a very strong
mm.
thing that pulled me
A
back.
weapon being used against you.
Sorry,
It was a weapon being used against you.
I don't know, but it was successful. Uh, so yeah, that was quite tough. And then anyway, without going into all the details there, because there was a lot of stuff happening,
Hmm.
and I had to more or less run in the middle of the night from Ecuador to Peru. So I
Did
was
you?
in Peru completely broke.
Wow.
It was very challenging
I bet, yeah.
in a country, a very violent country,
Mm,
parts of it,
mm,
and things like that. But anyway, I returned to Europe, and then with the non-duality aspect with me,
mm, mm,
but you know, still very strong person
mm,
there,
mm,
personalization.
mm,
And I listened a lot to Rupert Spira during for years
mm,
until you re-emerged. I
mhm.
don't know when you have you been on YouTube? I mean, it's quite recent, isn't it, that you started with
Yes, well, really, I just continued having one-to-one conversations with people, making contact from the conscious TV programs. So that went on for a long time. But things changed. I met, well, had some conversations with Rhonda Byrne in 2016, and then she released her book, The Greatest Secret, and that resulted in, quite a lot more attention. And then, my YouTube channel emerged, and so it's kind of accelerated, I guess, in the past 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, okay. It was a few years after that, I guess,
Mm,
that that I noticed that you were on YouTube
mm,
again after the conscious TV things.
mm. Yes.
And that uh, that made it clear to me that the difference between knowing of our true nature and being it.
Great.
It was your conversations, your pointings. Like I can't really say
Mm.
something was transmitted there. Yeah. So
So when would you say there maybe wasn't a particular moment, but there was just a recognition that that clarity was there?
yeah, I can't say if it was a particular moment because probably because I've been familiar with it for so long
Yes.
that it sort of just
Mm,
went into that
mm, mm,
more.
mm,
Yeah, I think that's tremendously effective for people,
mm,
these type of conversations.
mm,
And I listen to, I think all of your interviews and things like that as well, which has been great also,
mm.
because it's really helpful to get, there's still that the narrator, the voice, demiurge, whatever you want to call it,
Yes.
is always there to try to put doubts, right?
Yes.
So it's
Yeah.
great to clarify
Mm.
things that come out via these conversations.
Yeah, and also it's such a relief to discover that the narrator isn't something which is personalized. It isn't something that we need to address on a personal level and that we need to process it or welcome it or release it or anything, because it's like a transmission which is being projected into the body mind as an invitation. And once you discover that, then it's really like discovering that you can turn it off rather than thinking that you need to process it in some way. The processing is it's like watching, a poor quality soap opera, and then thinking that, doing some psychotherapy or something, you can have a beneficial effect on one of the characters in the soap. It doesn't really do much. But it's quite a simple solution when you understand how it works. And yeah, that's really, it's amazing the way people come along. And it's, um, it's just really inspiring because the different angles and it's like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, and everyone is contributing in some way. And there's the way there's resonance with certain people's stories, and but it's completely impersonal in a way that it's happened. But it's just it's really amazing to witness it, really.
It is, and um, it's impersonal, but each one has their own set of conditioning
Yes,
that can be utilized.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
It can be utilized
Mm.
sort of in a
Yes,
from that particular,
yes,
and that can be that can be the challenge initially,
yes,
but it's perceived as, oh, I should, this is a problem when it's looked at, what then this, it can be very helpful,
yes.
and that can sort of be our sort of individual part, if you want.
Yeah, yeah. It's been quite common in the way that the interviews can actually trigger people as well, because they're like invitations. One of the most common ones is the idea, oh, this person is more self-realized than I am, which is crazy. Um, but that can be quite that can be quite a common one. It's worth knowing that, actually, because when you realize that goes on. But with realization, and then seeing people where they're speaking from their infinite nature, it's like a communication which is coming, it's within the unified field of consciousness, so it registers more deeply than if it's just being explained conceptually from the personal realm.
Yes. And to go back again then, to what you asked me before about the what's going on in the relative realm, right?
Yes.
That I started looking into there and back
Yeah.
in. And that was also, I'd say, um, can be helpful if one is inclined to do that. If there
Yes.
is something inside one that feels, well, maybe there is fear to look into certain things,
Yeah.
but if there is an inclination to do it,
Yes.
because that could be very actually very helpful,
Yes.
um, and as it was for me.
Mm. Well, seeing that the dualistic realm is a kind of energetic construct, and it includes the mental, emotional, and physical realms, or the astral, etheric, and physical. Um, you can see that energetic aspect is operational on virtually every level. And wherever you look, you find it somehow.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, and because again, I mean, it's not for everyone,
Mm,
but if inclination is there, because from the what I mentioned before, the new age stand, which is, oh, positivity only, light only
mm,
stance,
mm,
um, it's what one could ask, well, if I negate ultimately an aspect of myself
mm.
or the self,
Yes.
if I'm afraid to look into it,
Yes.
what does that mean, and so on.
Yes.
But again, not that's not saying it's necessary for everyone to look
No.
into
No.
these.
But fear really is never a good basis for either action or inaction. So, if there's fear arising, it's worth having a look to see what's going on, really.
Yeah. because it can be. I mean, it's not pleasant stuff when you start to see what's happening in the play out realm, and there might be an inclination then to do the so-called spiritual bypassing.
Mm,
Just to sort of lean back into the, well, it's all,
mm,
you know, I know we're all one consciousness, and this is just a dream. Okay, yeah, it's true,
mm.
but I wake up in the morning and it continues.
Yes.
And we'd like to have positive experiences
Mm,
for ourselves and for our children.
mm, mm.
And so it's not like, so the experience aspect is not insignificant.
No. Yeah, well, consciously withdrawing the energetic investment in the dualistic realm is something which is, quite a simple solution, because it's really overinvestment in the personal realm which makes it really problematic, and also the idea that we're inhabiting the dualistic realm when really we never entered it. It's all a kind of consenting to a particular ride, really. It's like an experience which, when it's presented to us, it's made to look as though we are dwelling in the dualistic realm when actually we never entered it. And that can be quite liberating, really, because you see that um, resting in one's infinite nature is the ultimate solution in that sense. But as you say, it still doesn't resolve the structures in the dualistic realm. The dualistic structures still need to be addressed in some way. But I think the ultimate solution is when the dualistic realm can be reintegrated back into unity. And I think, people who are anchoring unity consciousness in their experience, and it's something which they're living from and disconnecting from the investment in the dualistic realm, that's really the solution.
Yes. Yeah, and because that is a solution for anyone and everyone.
Mm. Yes.
That's why it doesn't really matter. But what matters is, I suppose, we the individual expressions of that
Mm.
have perhaps different roles to play,
Yes. Yes.
if you want to put it like that, within this game.
Yes.
And by denying a natural inclination to go a certain way or this way
Yeah.
or that way, but that's also just part of it will be because if we deny ourselves or deny the natural intuitive guidance, the lessons become more and more severe, in
Yes.
my own
Absolutely.
experience,
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
quite severe.
Yeah. And I guess where we're guided is something which is variable, because some people seem to have, quite a gentle ride in some ways, and then others, it's a more intense version. But it's really, yeah, so important just to be true to oneself. You can't, there's no alternative, because if we try to, take, a different direction, then yeah, it becomes quite unpleasant, really.
Yeah, it does. It can be, yeah, quite severe.
Mm,
Like in my own case, there's certain times where I knew I was going against my own
mm.
intuition,
Yeah,
and the consequences seem to get more drastic for doing
yeah.
so. Well, that was a while ago now. I learned my
Mm.
lesson. Now I don't do that anymore, but
Mm. And how have things been since the sort of deepening of realization? And when we were having a little chat earlier, you seem to live in a very idyllic way, really, in a lovely location, and just everything kind of working well, from effortless being in one sense.
yeah, yeah, it's it really is uh, the a natural consequence of abiding more and more
Mm.
as the attributeless being. things just seem to fall into place.
Yeah.
So yeah, I am fortunate in that sense.
Mm.
But many people who look at my life now would
Yes.
not see that,
No.
because uh, I don't have architectural assignments right now,
Hmm.
because I don't want to be a part of the tax system and all that.
Mm. Mm.
So people here in Sweden, at least, are afraid to hire me.
Yeah.
So that
So
has
you're living
financial.
quite, yeah, you're just living quite simply, really.
There is.
But you're obviously still interacting with many people. And yeah, well, it's quite a good example, really, of living in a very simple way. And it just seems perfect in terms of integrating the ability to function from impersonal being, because being alone, um, you don't need to step into the dualistic realm at all, really.
Yeah, it's true. And I mean, my my everyday is, I feel blessed.
Mm.
I love, I go in, I'm surrounded. I literally live on a peninsula in a big lake in the
Fantastic.
sort of southern part of Sweden.
Mm.
And I'm surrounded by forests.
Mm.
I go out virtually every day,
Mm.
just go for walks in the forest.
Mm.
And to me, it's heaven.
Yeah.
And I live in a nice big house,
Mm.
and yeah, it's nice. It's a very,
Idyllic, really.
sorry.
Very idyllic.
Yeah, it is.
Mm.
It is. Um, so it's definitely clear that that is a consequence of just following,
The
like
inner knowing has been there all your life, really, hasn't it? Even when you were 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, it was there then, really.
yeah, I realize that now, right? That it was always there.
Mm. Quite uncompromising, which it's been quite a rich journey in many ways, but it's um, it's amazing, really, if you look at the human experience and the odds of realization. If you were looking at it in terms of odds, you'd say, well, it's quite, the likelihood of realization, the odds seem very heavily stacked against us, but the inner knowing will just guide you, and guiding you through all those adventures and experiences. It just shows how reliable it is.
Yeah, and then the trust, every time you trust your own inner guidance,
Yes.
there's a confirmation because it's always right.
Yes. Yeah.
Now you might end up in challenging situations, but you
Mm.
can see that, well, that was exactly what I needed.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
Uh, so yeah,
That's wonderful. Well, you have a lot to offer, really. I think with do you feel inspired to um speak to people about realization, or about, because it's really nice having a conversation with you, because there's realization of one's infinite impersonal nature, but there's also deep knowledge about the structures within the dualistic realm, which is that's a really good combination.
yeah, I've been sort of resisting it for years almost, I
Mm.
would say, because I don't want to be uh, public
Yes.
in that sense.
Yeah.
But it has pushed me and pushed me. So
Yeah.
now I am actually, since the architecture thing is not really happening right now, I
Mm.
don't want to force it.
No.
I feel naturally that I would love to. Uh, it seems like it's going towards helping people
Yes.
more in those ways. So I
Yes.
am working on that right now, working on a website and things like that, because I don't have money really right now.
Mm.
I'm doing everything my own, so it takes some time
Yes.
setting up a web page,
Mm.
and but I have been preparing a lot of material, exactly like you say,
Yes.
to highlight, and for those who are interested,
Mm.
where it's not just one or the other, not just non-duality,
Mm.
speaking directly about that, but
Yes.
from that, looking at other aspects for those who might be
Yes.
interested.
Yeah.
So
That's a great combination, actually, because there are people who realize their true nature and don't necessarily have a deeper understanding of the way the dualistic realm works. But for there to be total stability in one's infinite impersonal nature, the consequences of the dualistic realm need to be understood in a way, and to be able to function where the dualistic system isn't impacting too deeply on us.
yeah, I feel so, because life goes on within the dream,
Yes.
and my actions, I mean, I can choose every day how I interact with my surroundings,
Mm. Mm.
right?
Yes.
And but the less some less obvious things, perhaps,
Yeah.
I might not be aware that my certain actions are actually contributing to further slavery, violence, and injustice, just by so because we're not necessarily conscious that
Mm.
that's the case. But I
Mm.
think everyone who listen to you, who hear this, I think have a genuine drive
Mm.
and love for truth.
Yeah, absolutely.
That might not mean that, again, that they want to delve into some of the darker aspects of this,
Mm.
but just to be more conscious.
Mm.
We all been traumatized in different ways.
Yes.
And for me, trauma, I translate that to, if I'm traumatized, there is a tendency to shut down consciousness around a certain area.
Yes, exactly. Well, really, invitations into trauma are designed to put us into personalization, and it's in various aspects of personalization that our energy is compromised, either mentally, emotionally, or physically. So that's why it is really important to understand the way the dualistic realm works, because it's possible to function primarily from outside there by resting and remaining as impersonal being, and then we're not investing in the personal realm. But that there can be realization, but without an understanding of the implications of the dualistic realm, and so the dualistic content is then perceived as being personal. So the processing of that content, if it's perceived to be personal, can go on for a very long time.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
That's great, Jacob. It's really nice to have a conversation. It's amazing the way people I get the privilege of speaking with are bringing different things forward, and it is all to do with resonance, and it's all being guided by the infinite being. So it's perfection in the way it's being revealed.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful, and you're doing a amazing job in that sense.
Well, an amazing job is being done, but not by.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I take that as a compliment, though. Thank you. That's good. But yeah, it is.
No, but it's just clear, sorry, it's just clear that the individual expression of the absolute, you could be more or less aligned with that.
Mm, mm,
And it's obvious that in my from my perspective, you are very much aligned with that. You're living that.
mm. And you too, in a nice, quiet way.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny the way people perceive things, because maybe people you've known for years, or people who live in the locality um, probably don't understand you fully. But really, the sequence of events has led you to the most amazing kind of self-sufficiency spiritually and physically, really, which is very rare. And it's a very rich way to live when you see the options available in human experience. And it's yeah, really inspiring to see that that's been achieved.
Yeah, I feel that I start to see that more and more that I have something to give there.
Mm, mm.
Certain tools
Yes. Yeah.
to utilize within the dream
Yes.
that can be helpful
Yes.
to I mean, obviously, Rhonda and the secret, that's one big aspect of this, something that I is very central to my work as well.
Mm.
The whole idea of manifestation and things like
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
But and I didn't mention that. There's so much I didn't mention, but
Mm.
while I was in Ecuador,
Mm.
I was I ended up, it wasn't planned, it wasn't, people just started coming to me and I was teaching them how to manifest reality.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So and it grew and grew and grew, and but I felt more and more, well, it became too ego driven. So I dissolved that whole thing
Do you
because
do you feel you could present a more kind of integrated version now?
that's exactly what I am working on.
Mm.
Yeah.
It is a very interesting topic because manifestation is something which traditionally is utilizing the mind to um, visualize certain desirable experiences or whatever we wish to manifest. But my feeling is that there's a kind of higher level of manifestation, which is through alignment with our infinite nature, because infinite intelligence knows exactly the things to bring satisfaction and for our higher purpose to be realized. And that's something which infinite intelligence knows, which the mind doesn't. um, but it's yeah, I'd be interested to know more about that, really, the way
I'm
that.
writing a book on that specifically.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Uh, Sort of a handbook in how to manifest.
Fantastic.
And it is different from The Secret in that sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, we can certainly put your details below the video. So if anyone's inspired to contact you, regarding self-realization or manifestation or the dualistic realm, they'll know exactly where to come.
Yeah, I mean, for now, there is not much else but my email, but that's
Mm.
fine.
Yeah,
Uh, Absolutely.
fantastic. Well, thanks so much. I'm sure there's much more we could talk about, Jakob, but that's probably enough. I think that's quite groundbreaking in a way because it's gone quite deep, really.
Yeah, and it's maybe perhaps we touched on areas that not normally come up
Yes.
in these type of conversations.
Yes.
And I think the time is right for that now.
Yeah, I agree. That's definitely the feeling. Fantastic. Well, it's been wonderful to meet you, and I'm sure we'll be staying in contact. And
Yeah, definitely.
yeah, so thanks so much. It's yeah, been really nice. We had a great conversation before we started.
That wasn't recorded, was it?
No.
Okay, just wondering. Yeah, it was great. Okay.
That was
Thank
off
you,
the
David.
that was strictly off the record.
No, just kidding.
All the best to you, Jakob. It's been
Yeah,
thank you.
same to you, David. Take care.
Yeah, you too. Bye bye.